I'm going to do an experiment as we begin our conversation today about time. If you may, if you have your phone on, you reach into your phone and check your screen time for today. In order to be like you all, I'm being slightly transparent. That was my screen time 1 week ago. My name is Robert Bench. I am a senior advisor at the MIT Media Lab and the co-founder of Radius, a spin-out from the Media Lab at MIT. And I spend the bulk of my time thinking about incentives. Why are we drawn and driven to do what we do? And how much of that is conscious or subconscious? And particularly with regards to our devices and our time, how has the last 30 years of development of the open internet and value systems caused us to change our relationship with machines from us being man in charge of machine to machine driving the time of man? At the origin of the open internet in the, what I'll say, the mid-90s, going back to the founding of DG, research institutions like MIT were fairly straightforward in their use of the internet. It was funded by governments or the tuition of the students, and organizations like MIT and the DoD in the US were able to fund themselves. And when they commercialized the internet in the mid-90s, there was a dream and a vision of a medium of exchange across the internet, paying for goods and services, for data and compute. This was so embedded in the origin of the internet that there's a code to this day in the HTTP code called 402, which was meant to serve payments on the open internet. Unfortunately, the technology was not there. So when 402 was created in the mid-90s, the internet, the commercial internet, was run through subscription models like AOL and Prodigy in the US. Those failed. Paywalls were attempted for things like the New York Times, and those have struggled greatly. What has persisted is an advertising-based internet. Now, my favorite thinker on incentives isn't necessarily a philosopher, but is my favorite American polymath, a man named Charlie Munger. He's most well known as the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, but he was also a renowned physicist, founded the greatest law firm in the United States, and then only in his 60s became vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And he had one absolute rule. If you show me the incentive, I will show you the outcome. And due to the failure of technology to create micropayments and the failure of the business model of paywalls and subscriptions, what persisted in the internet was advertising sales. Our dominant companies, Google, Meta, are ad platforms in their core and walled gardens to sell those ads. In order to sell those ads, they need your data. In order to get their data, they need your time. Your time to swipe, your time to scroll, your time to like, maybe your time to poke, I think, as it was back in the day. But ultimately, the internet as it currently stands is based on you in service of the machine, based upon our yet to build a value transfer mechanism to provide incentives outside of advertising. But there's been a change in that paradigm. Mark Zuckerberg famously talked about his key metric at Meta being the time you spend on your device on his applications. In short, your attention. And we see, I don't think my screen time is probably much different than yours, although I think some of our Buddhist monks in the room may be slightly lower than 7 hours. I think that's a fairly standard number. Research shows that a 24-year-old in San Francisco spends about 65% of their waking hours on a screen. In Shenzhen, that goes up to 75. So in the course of a 100-year life, 75 years of your waking hours are spent on a screen. But in 2017, researchers from Google, of all places, wrote this now famous paper, Attention is All You Need. Now, they're not talking about human attention, they're talking about neural network attention, of how neural networks can decide what is the right information to use and what is the right information to ignore. And that attention paper is now the foundation of our modern artificial intelligence paradigm that is growing rapidly today. For artificial intelligence systems to be created, we need to think about what this stack is coming that might replace our old attention internet. And to start with the basics, we need power. And here in Tokyo, we have TEPCO. In the United States, we may have Dominion. But power companies are rapidly changing how they think about what they're providing due to the needs of this new economy. Nuclear is being rethought, and certainly sustainable energy is being invested in heavily. They're being invested in heavily because they need to power data centers. And these data centers are being run by Google, by Microsoft, by AWS. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being invested in data centers right now in the US to serve this new paradigm. Because these data centers need to run new chips. NVIDIA has grown to being arguably the largest, most valuable company in the world because new chips need to be put in those data centers, which are powered by TEPCO, to run the foundation models that have been built off the attention economy, the new attention economy, I should say. And Anthropic and OpenAI and the like are creating new ways to experience the internet. Of particular interest is how it's eroding the former paradigm. The former paradigm of swipes, eyeballs, clicks, likes. How does that work when Anthropic is doing the swiping and the clicking and the liking? Who pays Google for those eyeballs? Or does the whole system need to change? At Radius, we think about this last step in the ring, which is agents. We think our current use of foundational models like OpenAI and Anthropic will be very brief. And our vision of the future, and you're seeing this at great depth at MIT currently, in the Media Lab, is that agents are going to be the de facto user interface of these foundational models. Agents are fairly straightforward. It's software that can sense data, can make a decision about what to do with that data. It can act independently, and then it can learn from what it just did. The problem with agents, as we think about incentive systems, is while agents are empowered to act, they're empowered to sense, and they're empowered to enable compute from one of those data centers, they have no way to incentivize themselves to do so. So we are now in a vacuum system where the existing model that has been built by Meta and Google is to find ways to sell advertising to incentivize automated systems. My bet is that barring decisive action, decisive investment, that paradigm will continue. Advertising sales will continue to find a way to work. But again, much to the detriment of our time. If advertising sales persist as the incentive model for this new agentic internet, once again, man will not only be in service of machine, but increasingly powerful machines, and at an increasing loss of our time. Enter stablecoins. For over a decade, I've worked on stablecoins. Particularly at my time at Circle, I had the great benefit of building USDC, particularly the legal and regulatory models for it. And stablecoins are very interesting in that they operate on open public networks. So finally, you have value systems that can move autonomously without the need of an intermediary to enable them to work. They're naturally programmable through smart contracts. The challenge with stablecoins and agents, however, is agents at their current scale are trending towards about the volume of API calls in the open internet. Tens of billions a day. Despite stablecoins being faster and cheaper than bank transactions, to date they've been far too slow to be a medium of value and a medium of exchange for real-time internet activity. They are simply too slow and too expensive to replace ads. So for the past 4 years, my team at MIT and my team at Radius have been focusing on, can we linearly scale stablecoin networks to start being structured like TCP/IP, where the more need you have for that stablecoin network to move, it increases speed and lowers cost. The only way that we are going to replace advertising as a value system, an incentive system of the open internet, is to enable a medium of exchange that scales with the internet. So the line through is we have power at TEPCO, we have data centers from AWS, we have hardware from NVIDIA, we have foundational models from Anthropic and OAI, and now we have stablecoins from the likes of Tether and USDC. But to change the incentive model, we need a stablecoin network that enables the use of the open internet that goes in the millions of transactions a second, with millions of transactions per dollar, that have latency less than the underlying models themselves. We think that unless we solve this incentive system, we will remain subservient to machines. And that's what we've been building at Radius for the past 2 years. We think that, to the conversation earlier today, for man and machine to remain in harmony, man must remain in control of their time and how they access the machine. So going back to that screen time, we do have a choice, and we are advocating for this change at Radius and in our lab at MIT. 7 hours a day for a father of 3, a co-director of a lab and a CEO of a company. That's a lot of time to spend looking at a screen. It's a lot of time away from baseball games, a lot of time away from loved ones. I do not think my screen time is much different than yours. We must remove ourselves from this ad-based paradigm. And in our view, the only way to do so is to get our time back, is quite literally to buy our time back by replacing ads with native transactions on-chain with stablecoins. The line goes through. We have to cross out ads as the incentive model of the internet to get our time back. In about 2.5 minutes left, I'll give you your time back. Thank you.